In 2023, I watched 365 movies. There was a lot to learn from this experience. Challenge? I guess it was a challenge. Not least of all, could I do it? Spoiler alert, I did. But at the beginning there was a lot of hesitation on my part about whether or not I would phone it in. Sit down for a couple hours, watch like 60 short films on YouTube, and then call it quits. That wasn't the point. The point wasn't to be able to say that I did it. It was to confront each film on its own merits, think critically, and discuss. So, let's discuss. I loved Barbie. It's a great examination of not necessarily just femininity, but what symbols are and what they do for us. And I think it's a miracle that Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach were allowed to do what they did. I think the greatest drawback to the movie is the fact that it kind of is a commercial, but there's something going on within it that is so shattering. It just feels like it's being so truthful. I'm so glad that I watched it after Oppenheimer. I think that was such a happy accident that we all decided to have together. I think that those movies were made better by each other in terms of viewing experience. I had a great day that day. Cillian Murphy is amazing. Of course, the screenplay is good. The women are underdeveloped, as is to be expected, but thematic gravity of the subject matter is not shied away from. It's not underplayed and it's not overplayed. It's like just the right amount of gravity. Earth-shaking. I was left with a lot of the same feelings after watching Killers of the Flower Moon. Thank God that Martin Scorsese is still making movies and that he's making them about things that he cares so deeply about. Not very many movies that are as long as Killers of the Flower Moon are in their length. It's great to see Scorsese developing this kind of theme of damaged and dangerous men doing violent things over the course of his whole career, because it seems to get more and more frank with itself every time he redevelops it. I watched The Wolf of Wall Street as well earlier this year. You watch that movie and then you watch Killers of the Flower Moon and you see what Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio are doing with those characters. It's so good. It's so good. John Wick Chapter 4 fucking ruled. You can skip 65. Super Mario Bros. Movie. It's a weirdly safe movie. It's a really easy movie. Easy to watch, easy to make. Aside from the beautiful animation, I think that those animators were probably exploited to hell and back in order to make that thing. Speaking of animators being exploited to hell and back, though, Across the Spider-Verse is gorgeous. What an achievement. But also, yeah, something needs to fucking change. And then I gotta say, the creator, I think the biggest problem with the creator is the fact that Gareth Edwards doesn't fully know where to put the camera in order to put us in John David Washington's character's shoes. He's great in the movie. The camera it's everywhere and it's showing us everything. And I think it creates some beautiful stuff. And yes, it's the Sony FX3. We can all get over it now. Man, I just, sometimes he would pull way back and I'd be like, I gotta see what's going on though. I think that if that movie had come out in the 80s, it would be a classic today. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning is not being talked about. It's good. My favorite Mission Impossible movie is Ghost Protocol. I want to have a little more fun, I think. The most fun that I had watching that movie was in the train car sequence, just like chasing up through the train as it's falling. That's possibly one of the greatest action set pieces of all time. It's so well designed. I love Indiana Jones. I was going to love Dial of Destiny no matter what, but I think I loved it even more than I was expecting to. And I think that people are going to talk about it in terms of beating a dead horse, and I think that something special happened. Wild that it happened at all, and for that I'll be thankful, I think, forever. I want to talk about short films for a quick second. My film Woodsman that I made with my brother Phineas and my best friend Scott debuted this year. It had its premiere at the San Luis Obispo Film Festival. It was shown in several film festivals worldwide, and you can watch it for free right now on YouTube. I'll put a card up and you can click to watch it if you want. I got to see a lot of amazing short films. The film Someone Will Assist You Shortly won the Central Coast Filmmakers Showcase Best Drama Short in 2022, I believe, which is the same award that Woodsman won in 2023. An absolutely stellar film. If you get a chance to see it, Someone Will Assist You Shortly. Beautifully written and directed. The film Angulos de la Hora, an animated film from a filmmaker on the Central Coast of California. The real meat and premise of the film itself is brilliant. A film called The Story of This Life. Really beautiful. One of the greatest achievements of this film was its ability to handle really poignant moments of intense emotion without requiring too much of its actors. It was able to shoot around some moments that were implied rather than shown. With shorts, it's difficult. You have a limited runtime, limited amount of time with your actors, limited amount of time to get audiences to feel the heights of emotion that you might want them to feel. Shadow Brothers Sunday, written and directed by Alden Ehrenreich, a surprise treat, really poignant. The characters in that movie were brought to life so vividly in such a short amount of time. If you have an Amazon Prime membership, I would recommend checking out their short film showcase, specifically the film Roy, which was the last movie that I watched in 2023 on New Year's Eve. Really, really great. A very, very sweet and funny and charming movie. And then I spent a good portion of the early part of 2023 watching all of Robert Eggers's filmography. There's some interesting stuff that he did before he got the chance to work on a feature. I think the best of his short films is Telltale Heart. It's an adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe's famous story, and it's wonderful. In terms of comedy, one of the standout favorites that I had this year was Unexpected, since I hadn't heard much about it, but it's a Ron Howard movie called Parenthood. The way that it captures that kind of like early 90s warmth. I feel like there's this period of time from the late 80s into the early 2000s when things are still shot on film before the move to digital, and all of the film stock has this just lovely, lovely warmth. There's so much heart, a little bit of sentimentality, but it is a comedy. I also had the privilege of seeing the film Blackberry before its theatrical release at the San Luis Obispo Film Festival, which was a great treat. The movie's fantastic. If you can find it streaming, I would highly recommend it. It was really great to see that movie in a theater surrounded by a bunch of other people, because there are key few moments where we're kind of, looked directly in the eyes by the characters in the movie and confronted by smartphones and how they developed and, what they mean to us and where they currently are situated in our culture. And you could feel it in the room, the air shifted. My senses were absolutely pummeled in the best possible way by Bullet Train. There's so much to love about Bullet Train. As an action movie, as a comedy movie. We're kind of in this space with action where John Wick came along and we're getting a lot of invention, variations on formula. It's no wonder that it's kind of developed a huge following after its theatrical release on streaming, just because there is so much to love and the characters are so wonderfully brought to life. In a similar vein, martial arts comedy, this one's a classic though. I watched Police Story for the first time this year. It's just an awesome Jackie Chan movie from the 80s that's got such reckless abandon. It just feels like it's constantly on the verge of completely falling apart. The humor in it is so built into the physicality, and it embodied one of my favorite aspects of comedic filmmaking, which is when the camera itself is funny. Before 2023, I had never seen Legally Blonde or Mean Girls, which I actually think was a huge mistake on my part. Both of these movies are so influential to culture and the way that characters talk in movies. Tina Fey's writing in the original 2004 Mean Girls, the writing is just so sharp that you have to sit forward in your chair and you have to lean towards the screen. I mean, obviously there's incredibly quotable moments from that movie that have kind of embedded themselves in pop culture and the memes and all of that. I was familiar with phrases and lines of dialogue from the movie, but I was so surprised at how unimportant they were in the context of the scenes. And I think that that's a testament to just how good the writing is. You get lines like "On Wednesdays we wear pink," which after the fact are huge cultural phenomena, but within the context of the scene, completely glossed over. It's just said and then you move on, and that's what makes it so funny. There was a lot to learn dialogue-wise and humor-wise and character-wise from watching that movie and thinking about the writing. If I can go back to Steve Martin for a second, Father of the Bride, from a great screenplay by Nancy Meyers. Steve Martin has this quality to him that you just can't help but want to root for him. Even when he's doing insane things things and ending up in jail for arguments over bread. I think that the it factor and star power are very often talked about aspects of the movie making business, but nobody ever really like engages in what that is. And I think it comes down to charisma. There's different kinds of charisma, of course, that you can be meek and charismatic, you can be like strong-willed and charismatic, but I was thinking about charisma a lot while watching Steve Martin in Father of the Bride. Absolutely hysterical. Speaking of absolutely hysterical, Monty Python's Life of Brian, I was not familiar with it as much as I was familiar with Holy Grail, but Life of Brian is maybe better. There's something really interesting going on in that movie with not only the humor, but also the commentary. And I get it, why it was so controversial at the time, and why, to a certain extent, it remains controversial today. There's, of course, some brilliant bits. The movie really feels much more like a series of really intelligently plotted comedy skits that are very loosely woven together, but that's the way Monty Python works. Circling back to charisma and star power for a minute, I gotta talk about Daniel Radcliffe for a second. I watched 2 comedies starring Daniel Radcliffe this year, Guns Akimbo and Weird, the Al Yankovic story. He has this unhinged madness bubbling just under the surface that I never would have expected from him. I think there's a lot of comparisons being drawn between him and Robert Pattinson in the way that they both had kind of teen heartthrob sort of characters and then went into the indie scene and started collaborating with creatives that they found interesting first and foremost. But I hope that for both of them, if they plan on moving back into big budget movies, Pattinson is Batman now and whatever, I hope to see him in more stuff like The Lighthouse, and Daniel Radcliffe, I hope that he keeps doing such strange and wonderful things. Guns Akimbo, a bit of a messy movie. Daniel Radcliffe is really what holds it together, and then Weird is just a brilliant parody, of course, because it's Weird Al. Popstar, Never Stop, Never Stopping. Bit of connective tissue between that and Mean Girls is Tim Meadows, which I found myself absolutely loving Tim Meadows this past year. He made me laugh so hard with one specific line. It's this clip, I'll play it now, from Popstar.
What the fuck you say to me? Say that shit again, young blood. I will eat your head. I will eat your fucking head.
I was dying. I had to rewind it just to watch him say it again. I wanted to talk about Popstar right after Weird. Weird is a parody of biopics, whereas Popstar is a parody of like documentaries, like the Justin Bieber Never Say Never movie and stuff like that. I think they're both kind of their times. I'm interested to see how they're going to age because, you know, Weird came out right after stuff like Bohemian Rhapsody and Rocket Man, and it's playing off of all of that. Whereas Popstar, I found myself not quite connecting with the comparisons that it was trying to draw just because they were of the early 2010s, much more than the later 2010s, like the movies that Weird is parodying. But of course, Andy Samberg is hysterical in it, and overall, it's a great movie. Staying on track with the music comedies for a minute, Mamma Mia, just comfort food. That movie, I hadn't seen it before. I have 2 things to say about it. First of all, just an absolute achievement in terms of taking a stage show and turning it into a film. If something's an adaptation of something else, it really needs to capitalize on the medium that it's being adapted into. And second of all, I think that one of the greatest crowning achievements of Mamma Mia is the way that it approaches treating middle-aged people as attractive. There are no jokes at the expense of any of its leads. I was really touched by the way that all of these middle-aged people who are gorgeous people are treated like attractive, alluring sex symbols or objects of desire for other people. I thought that was really well done. Meryl Streep, I mean, we all love her for a reason, right? Moving on to horror. I'm a huge horror fan. I love horror movies. I watched a lot of my old favorites this past year. The history of horror as a genre and the way that it interplays with other genres has always been one of my favorite aspects of movies. I have an opinion to share about one of the most talked about movies from 2022. So, kind of trite at this point, but I'm still going to talk about it anyway. Skinamarink. Viral marketing campaign. People flocked to the theaters. It's a huge achievement in terms of turning a budget around. They made bank with nothing, and for that I applaud them. The movie itself, I think that horror fans very quickly will go straight to, I wasn't scared by it, therefore it wasn't a scary movie. That's all, fine. But Skinamarink, it did scare me and it did unsettle me, but I still don't think that it was a very good movie. I was unsettled by it in its approach to technique. There's some really brilliant stuff going on with creating the illusion of motion in the texture of the film grain, which is emulated. It was entirely shot digitally, and you can tell that it's emulation rather than the real thing. Biggest failure of that film is its inability to reward its audience. You've got to reward people for sitting there and feeling their way through it. And sometimes you can reward them by scaring them. And sometimes you can reward them by throwing something loud at them or showing them an answer or a question. And there were too few questions and too few answers in Skinamarink. I get it. I get what it's trying to do. I think it's interesting. I think it's better suited for YouTube content than the theater. I know that's a very strong opinion, but I'm going to stand by it. Another horror movie from 2022 that I watched in 2023 is Barbarian. What an insane ride. Minor spoilers for Barbarian, but I think that the transition from the opening with the Airbnb plotline into the introduction of Justin Long's character circling all the way back around to the Airbnb is one of the best variations on structure. It had me on the edge of my seat because it was such a subversion and it also rewarded me for paying attention. I have a lot of thoughts about horror that I'm thinking about honestly sharing in a later video. There's one other thing that I want to talk about before I move on to other movies, and that's Dracula and vampires. Start with Nosferatu. All of that visual language really started with Nosferatu. Bela Lugosi Dracula from the 30s, Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula from the 90s, and Renfield from 2023. I loved the original 30s Dracula. It's no wonder that it kickstarted the whole monster subgenre of horror, and I think that it really stands the test of time in terms of production value, in terms of performance, all of the theatricality. I just was amazed what Coppola did with his version. It's good, but it's not as great as it maybe is indulging itself to think it is. If you want all of the weird sort of dreamlike heightened sense of reality that you get in Bram Stoker's Dracula, I think Coppola did it better in Apocalypse Now. He did all of that. I think that the best part of Bram Stoker's Dracula is the opening. That prologue is astounding, it's gorgeous, it's startling, it's weird, and I love it. Renfield is wild. Renfield is weird. Production value is insane, and the best part of the movie, Nicholas Holt's great, Nicolas Cage is great, needs more Cage. It needed an extra dialogue pass. It needed to let itself, everything that Bram Stoker's Dracula overindulged in, Renfield should have indulged in at all. It feels like a movie that was edited down and edited down and edited down at every stage, pre-production, production, and post-production. Let's talk about my favorites. So, from Catherine Bigelow, I watched two films, Zero Dark 30 and Point Break. Point Break, I had never seen before, which was, it's a travesty. That movie fucking rocks. No wonder that it's such a cult classic at this point. It's such a good off-the-walls action movie. We have to thank Point Break for a lot of the stuff that we're getting now. Zero Dark 30 is such an interesting companion to that because it's not fun. Point Break is fun to watch. Zero Dark 30 is not fun, and it knows it. The intensity of it is so necessary to tell the story well, and Jessica Chastain is just amazing. They had gold, and they knew they had gold, and they filmed it like they had gold, and they didn't let any of it go to waste. It's amazing. Super tight pacing. It's so fast that the third act comes around, and then it gets suspended, and you feel the tension of the climactic scene, which I won't go into too much detail in case you want to watch it, but also it all happened in real life, or, close to. One of my favorite scripts that I met this year for the first time was Spotlight. Truly great understated performances. Another true-to-life tale that I think was brought to the screen with so much tact, genuine compassion for the people that's depicting and for the story that the people of the story are trying to tell. Prisoners and Arrival. Certain directors, they work with different cinematographers or different editors, and the visual language of the story changes. Denis Denis Villeneuve, his stuff has a through line, and it is him. Prisoners, a lot of people talk about Jake Gyllenhaal and Hugh Jackman's performances in that movie. All of the film bros who think that the best acting in the world is White Men Raging. But my God, is Jake Gyllenhaal such a good actor with just his fucking eyes. Hugh Jackman, of course, is also fantastic in the movie. The parts of the movie where he really is grappling with his actions and you have to watch him sit with what he's decided to do. So powerful. And then Arrival, Amy Adams is amazing. The love and attention to detail from a linguistic standpoint, and just high concept sci-fi with a grounded touch. It's great. It's great stuff. Jerry Maguire, I'd never seen Jerry Maguire before 2023. I had no idea how many famous quotes were from this movie. I feel like that's most people's reaction after they watch Jerry Maguire is, oh, that's from this? Again, with the cozy aesthetics, the film stock in that movie is just so warm. It makes the romance really pop. Fight Club, one of the most misunderstood movies of all time, because the people who love it, the people who love that movie don't get it. It is appalling, and in a great way. It's so absurd and upsetting. I think one of David Fincher's quotes that I think about all the time when I'm writing is that he thinks deep down that everybody in the world is a pervert. And I think Fight Club is that kind of movie. Everyone in that movie is a pervert, and it makes you feel perverted watching it. I don't think that it is an epic takedown of society. I think it's an epic takedown of masculinity. Great movie, and it's so dirty. It looks disgusting. It's such a gross looking movie. I love it. Just talk about muddying up the lens. Unforgiven, Clint Eastwood Western, great movie. Feels like a classic, is not a classic. I watched this right after watching Fistful of Dollars. You know, everything that Fistful of Dollars is, Unforgiven is a critique of it. I'd highly recommend watching those two movies back to back. Speaking of Westerns, I watched Seven Samurai for the first time this year and instantly understood movies. If you want to understand movies and why they are the way they are, watch Seven Samurai. And it feels like such an event to watch, even on your couch at home. By the time that the intermission rolls around and that music kicks in, you feel like you've signed on for something. I gotta talk about Julie and Julia, which is one of my new favorite movies of all time. I've already raved about Meryl Streep and Amy Adams in this video, but my God, are they a perfect pair. It's two different movies that are put together with such care. Nora Ephron was brilliant, and I think that her love of filmmaking is on full display with this movie. The Departed, kind of standard Scorsese, which is great. The man's standard is master. Perhaps the best Jack Nicholson performance of his enormous career. A great movie about places. Watch it and think about the places, and think about Boston, and think about everyone's attachment to the place that they come from. It's good stuff. Oliver Stone's JFK, great movie. Kevin Costner is fantastic. If you want to watch a play-by-play of that Zapruder tape, check out JFK. Of course, certain elements of it are up for debate about what was real, what was kind of overblown for the sake of the drama of the film. On its own merits, incredible. And speaking of not necessarily agreeing with a movie and still appreciating it, The King's Speech is great. Colin Firth is amazing, and Jeffrey Rush. We can think what we want about the royals, and we can think ill of them as much as they deserve, which is a lot. But it's such a compassionate movie. I had never seen Forrest Gump before 2023. Forrest Gump is good for all the reasons that it's touted for being good. There's a magic that Zemeckis has between Forrest Gump and Back to the Future and Contact. There's a comparison to be drawn between him and Steven Spielberg. Filming intimacy and interpersonal relationships. It's magic on screen. What Tom Hanks does for Forrest Gump, Jodie Foster does for Contact, because oh my God, is that her movie? I mean, maybe even more so than Silence of the Lambs. I think Silence of the Lambs, is kind of Anthony Hopkins' movie, but Jodie Foster in Contact is so goddamn good. She delivers some lines of dialogue that I personally don't think anyone else could do. Companion movie to Contact, I think, is Gravity, which won Alfonso Cuarón his best directing Oscar. My God, that movie is amazing. And at the center of both Contact and Gravity, you've got these complicated and fraught female characters, that are wonderfully brought to life. Sandra Bullock in Gravity is amazing. Everyone talks about the special effects in Gravity for good reason. They're invisible. a feature-length spacewalk, which really is what Gravity is. American Graffiti is maybe the best writing George Lucas ever did. It's really, really well written. It's got a strange, weird structure, and it feels a little bit like portions of it are rushed, but good God, are those characters great. He's made his billions, but I want to see something else from him, like American Graffiti. I watched 3 Coen Brothers movies this past year. Incredible. I gotta say, I have a hunch about Quentin Tarantino. I think that everything that Quentin Tarantino thinks he does really well, the Coen brothers do it better. And that's not to knock Tarantino. I think his movies are great. He's brilliant. I also don't necessarily think that he's made something better than Reservoir Dogs, though. I think that that's his best movie. I watched Pulp Fiction this past year, and it wasn't as good as I thought it might be. I'm getting off topic. Fargo and Raising Arizona and Inside Llewyn Davis are monumental. They're so funny, and I love each of them. And they're different. They're so different. But there's a melancholy streak through most Coen brothers movies, I think, that just their approach to violence and shocking an audience. It's all like watching a Coen brothers movie feels like you're watching someone pluck at the most finely tuned string instrument in the world. I already talked a little bit about Apocalypse Now. So instead I'll move on to a movie that I think you should watch right next to it, which is Full Metal Jacket. Kubrick's photographer's eye for cinematography is on full display in Full Metal Jacket. I think it's pretty easy to say that it's sort of 2 movies. I like the first one better. I also am of the opinion that Kubrick was a better photographer than he was a director. I stand by that. Everything that Vincent D'Onofrio offers to Full Metal Jacket, all of that I think is, you can attribute that 100% to those actors. I don't think you can say that Kubrick got that out of them. However, his images are beautiful and haunting. Right now, as soon as the video's done, I need you to go watch Banshees of Inisherin and then watch In the Name of the Father. Watch them both back to back. I have Irish heritage, I have Irish family members, and watching both of those movies felt like I understood them better than their personal trauma might have ever been able to let them understand about themselves. Watch those movies and think about your family and think about your family's history. No matter where you come from, think about the places and think about the people that you know that came from those places, because those 2 movies are about something ancient and intrinsic to all of us. I gotta talk about Alex Garland's Annihilation and Men. You know what? Maybe watch Fight Club and then watch Men. I think you'll get something out of it. Maybe I should do that. My God, what a grotesque movie. Again, I'm using these kind of these words that have negative connotations, but I mean it in the best way. Men is a grotesque movie, and I think it means to be so, and it achieves something really, really horrible. It's amazing. It's an amazing movie. You should watch it. And Annihilation, again, just like sitting and experiencing something that you're not fully prepared for. I think that Alex Garland is great at throwing something at an audience you can't be ready for, and you have to watch horrible things brought to life so starkly and so bluntly. I watched Tar. It's going to be such an influence for me, just in terms of what a lead actor can do for its lead character. Cate Blanchett is Lydia Tarr. The Fabelmans is the best thing that Steven Spielberg has done in a while. Holy shit, he still got it. But I think that the personal angle, and I think that the screenplay from Tony Kushner is really tight. It's just a tight movie. Every part of it is wound so closely and intricately. And the young cast in that movie, the kids are so good. But of course, Spielberg's always been good at getting amazing performances out of child actors. I already talked a little bit about Robert Eggers, so I'll just leave The Lighthouse at holy fuck. I was amazed by Willem Dafoe. Of course, everyone wants to talk about Robert Pattinson for good reason, because he's fucking great in that movie, but you can't get what you got out of Robert Pattinson if you don't have Willem Dafoe next to him. And of course, the artistry and the aspect ratio and the black and white and the special effects and the imagery, it's biblical. It's such a small, intimate, tiny little story, but it feels blown up to biblical proportions because of the imagery. I watched some kind of divisive movies this year too. I watched M. Night Shyamalan's Signs. It was a more shallow movie than I thought it was going to be, even halfway through. Don't watch Wish Upon, starring Joey King. Don't watch that movie. It's boring. It's not important. It's not important is a pretty, like, damning thing to say about a movie, but it isn't. Don't watch it. Nothing against Joey King. I mean, I liked her in Bullet Train. The movie itself is, could throw it out. Yeah, there's no baby in that bathwater. I had a lot of fun watching The Flash, but I also kind of feel guilty about that. I'll sort through that on my own time. And then the last thing I want to talk about before moving on to 2024 and what's next is Talk to Me. If there's any pipeline for online creators to go on to create art, truly like artistic expression, I want to celebrate it. And Talk to Me is amazing. I think that might have been the scariest movie I watched all year. Let's talk about 2024. I have been to the theater a couple of times already this year, and I've seen some great stuff already. Saltburn, fantastic. And yes, it's shocking. And yes, it's sensational. And yes, it is heavily influenced by a lot of other things, which I also like. But it is also something new and interesting, and I don't think people are giving Emerald Fennell enough credit for it. Poor Things was brilliant, and I want to see more people celebrating Emma Stone for that. It's a German expressionist movie made in 2023. What can you not love about it? And it made me really think about death in a really kind of normal and loving way, and I think that's an achievement. In retrospect, was watching 365 movies valuable? Yes. Am I going to do it again? I don't know. I'm going to keep watching movies. I'm going to watch so many movies this year. Is it going to be 365? I don't know. But if it is, I will have learned so much, because I learned a lot this past year. I think that I came away from this with a lot of tools that are going to help me as a filmmaker and as a moviegoer. Watch movies. Visit your local movie theater. Check out your local film festival. It's money well spent, because that's where we go to talk and share and interact with art and other people's art, and there's always something to be learned by interacting with someone else's art. Check out Woodsman on YouTube now. Check out the trailer for Ghost Kitchen, and follow us on social media in order to stay updated about whether or not Ghost Kitchen is coming to a film festival near you. Check out some of the things that I recommended in this video. Come back, leave a comment, watch an old favorite, watch something you haven't seen before, watch The Boy and the Heron, watch Do the Right Thing. Feel free to subscribe, like this video, and stick along with me, and we'll see what I learn next year. Anyway, peace. Mwah.